welcome back to the Down to the Wire podcast. We're back again, second podcast of the week. We're on fire. Jack, how you doing?
You know, I am better than I was earlier in the week. This European Super League is no more, and I'm happy for it.
Good stuff. And we're also joined by Dav. How you doing, Dav?
Hi lads, yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
Good stuff. That's all right. Thanks for coming back. So yeah, we're going to be talking mainly about the European Super League, because obviously that's been the kind of hot topic this week, isn't it? But we're also going to be doing a little bit of a, because we haven't talked about football for a little while now. It's mainly been Formula One, isn't it? So we're going to do perhaps a bit of an update, like what's happening with the top four in the Premier League, what's going on with the Championship. Because to be honest with you, the last time we talked about Championship football was when you were here, Dav. So
it's far too long.
It's been a little while.
Too long to not talk about the Championship.
Far too long. Absolutely far too long. So yeah, thought a lot of football stuff. We'll get our football expert back.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Should we dive straight in?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do that.
Cool. Good stuff. Right. Jack, I don't know whether you want to kind of run us through the premise of what the European Super League was proposing.
A 20-team tournament. No, I'm not going to do an X Factor voice.
20 teams, one tournament.
12 founding members who cannot be relegated. But no, it's a farcical idea where 20 of the so-called big teams, not based on merit, by the sounds of it, more money than anything, make a league. 12 founding teams which can never be relegated. They were looking for 3 more that couldn't be relegated as well. Then you'd have 5 teams which join on a yearly basis based on some sort of qualification formula, whether that's winning their domestic league or just winning some sort of qualification round or whatever. And yeah, it does have a format. They did have it sort of a structure to it where the 20 teams would be split into 2 groups of 10. They'd play the other 9 in their group, home and away. The top 4 teams would qualify for a knockout round, or rather the top 3. 4th and 5th from each would have a 2-legged knockout round to get through. And then from there on out, it's like the Champions League from the quarterfinal stage onwards. That is the proposed European Super League.
I mean, it's kind of similar. Like when you put it like that, it's a little bit similar to what happens with the NFL in the way there's like 2 split leagues that kind of eventually merge into one. I mean, obviously with the NFL, you have the kind of seeding system, don't you? Well, I guess that might happen with the quarters. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I
as a competition, ignoring the
in terms of a structure,
ignoring the relegation element, do you think it's a good idea?
In terms of the structure of the tournament, I haven't really got any problems.
Would you like to see top divisions have top domestic leagues have playoffs and all that in it? Not playoffs to get anywhere, but rather than league titles awarded on points, have it awarded on a playoff format.
Well, I feel as somebody who is well versed in championship stuff, they have a playoff. What are your thoughts, Dav?
Well, yeah, they do, but you still have your winner of the league. Like you're rewarded for the consistency of finishing in that top 2 over the season, and then I suppose there's always the argument that surely 3rd place, especially last season, third place. Well, often actually 3rd place can have a little bit of a gap on 4th, 5th, and 6th, and you think, on merit shouldn't they go up? But that's the kind of way they've decided to do it. It's the same with like the Pro 14 with rugby. Like they have a playoff. You can finish at the top of a league, but you still have the playoffs to decide who wins. And finishing top at the end of the league stage just gives you a home advantage for the semi or whatever. So I think if you could say let's have a playoff to decide who gets into, if you wanted to decide your top 4 on playoff, then that would be a discussion. But I think it would be harsh to play 38 games and go, unlucky, you've still got to play another 4 games.
I'd love to have seen Liverpool of last season go into a playoffs and end up losing it classically on the first game.
Don't. But no, to be honest, Sav, I'd agree with you. As in, like, for me, whenever anyone talks about, having a league and then putting it into a playoff to decide who wins, I always think of the Pro 14 and think, like, whoever finishes first, like, in terms of, like, there's no difference between finishing first and finishing fourth, really, in terms of, you know, where the likelihood of winning the league. Okay, I guess the argument would be if you finish higher up, you probably get the weak. Well, no, you get the weaker opposition in the playoff round. But as in, surely the whole point of a league is that over the course of, like you said, whether it's the Pro 14 or any football league, over the course of like 30 odd games or whatever, surely the whole point of that is that you decide, well, over the course of this season, this team deserved to win. Yeah. Whereas I feel like almost by making it like a playoff round, it almost becomes a bit of a lucky dip, doesn't it? Which is, I guess, is entertaining, but I've always felt it's a bit gimmicky. But I guess this is where it kind of gets a little bit, you get into the intricacies, don't you? Because I suppose the way that this all kind of played out, it turned out to be it was European Super League or Premier League / Champions League / La Liga and all the other leagues. Whereas I guess the people who were proposing the European Super League were hoping that this competition was going to be in addition to. Mm-hmm. So I guess at that point then, when you're having like a bit of a league system into a knockout thing, it's not just a league, if that makes sense. It kind of falls more under the category of a knockout tournament like the Champions League does. And I guess then at that point, I don't know. I'm a little bit jury's out on that.
That's fair enough. Well, do you not think, though, the element of a playoff system in any league sort of equalises out in a sense? But what I mean is Man City and Liverpool, not this year, but the years prior, maybe not even last year actually, the years prior to that, it was like knife edge, it'd be coming down to 2 points. And you're like, okay, on the balance of the consistency throughout a whole season, yes, that team deserves to win. But being as seasons are so long, and things like injuries or rogue decisions. I mean, we saw Cardiff City get relegated from the Premier League on a rogue decision when Azpilicueta was offside against Chelsea, and clearly offside, and still was allowed to score a goal. But you see these like decisions, and they go all left. They could go either way. They can really decide a title because of how close the margins are. Do you not think the idea of a playoff sort of negate that? And it's kind of like, okay, maybe these things happen here or there, but let's get down to the nitty gritty. Prove it. In a sense, you get a load of benefits anyway if you qualify first for this sort of playoff format. But
that's what you have all the cup finalists for, though, isn't it? Like that's an FA Cup final you've just described.
Yeah, and I guess my argument would be, I get what you're saying, but like you've said, like when it was close between Liverpool and City, but like last year. Are you seriously telling me that, like, at the end of and I know I'm probably biased because I'm a Liverpool fan, but are you seriously telling me that at the end of last season, you would then go into a playoff and say, say to Liverpool, you got to prove yourself now.
To be fair, in that scenario, I probably you wouldn't want to see a playoff. It's the same way when the Patriots lost the Super Bowl to the New York Giants back in, I can't remember when, but they went undefeated that season, 16-0. Only, I think the Miami Dolphins had done that, and that was 40 years before that. So you just don't see very many teams go 16-0 in the NFL.
No.
And they did that, and they get all the way to Super Bowl, and they lose. And it's like, that's a killer. And you feel like, everyone knows that Patriots team was one of the greatest of all times because they did 16-0. But if you haven't got the mustard when it comes to the crunch game, it just adds that extra flavour that everybody likes.
I do think the NFL is slightly different, though, than just... So, and I guess this is what I'm saying. For the European Super League, there's the potential that I think having a playoff at the end works because you've got two separate leagues merging into one. And it's the same with the NFL. You've got the NFC and you've got the AFC merging into one. So you basically get a winner of each league, and then you get, basically those winners play each other to decide who's the winner out of everyone. Whereas I feel like in the Premier League, they're all in one table anyway. They've all played each other twice. I feel like by the end of the season, with all of the information that you have, like points, goal difference, all of that sort of stuff, to then go, right, now we're going to put it into a playoff, I feel is a little bit gimmicky, to be honest.
I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, is there? Because what you've just described there, like the whole issue, the reason we like have the Champions League is because back in the day, I think it's right to say there was only like one English representative in the European Cup.
Yeah, it would just be the winners of each league rather than multiple teams.
Therefore, we could say back in the day you had the European Super League because you genuinely just had the best team in every nation thrashing it out. But there were, complaints were made and people were unhappy because, that was limited and whatever. So, they, in a more civilized fashion compared to this time round, people sat around a table and said, so how shall we work this out? So then you had 4 English teams, 4 Spanish teams, 4 German teams, and 4 Italians, 2 French. They worked out some kind of formula, didn't they, with their coefficients and all of that to kind of spread it out. So what we're essentially saying is let's go back to the 70s.
Yeah,
I mean, just a quick word on UEFA coefficients. Do you think that's just a sneaky ploy by the teams in, say, the Premier League and the Spanish League to say, hey, we want even more teams in there, in a sense? Your league is that much, you know what I mean? Your teams are that far behind ours. Nobody wants to watch Midtjylland. It's like, you guys are that much lower. We want Leicester City in. We want Wolves in a sense, rather because it's better for them. Do you think the UEFA coefficient is sort of a low grade? It's sort of going under the radar, that it's a bit of a elitist club thing.
Maybe a little bit. I mean, but I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I suppose you've got to have a balance between, because like throughout this whole Super League saga, the kind of rhetoric from all sides was, but every team can dream, and it's like, that's a fair point, as in, like, for example, you think a couple of years ago when it was the year after they won the league and Leicester got to the quarters, I think.
They lost to Atletico, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, they had a European run, I guess, like, that sort of circumstance. You're like, fans can dream, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, how far do you take that, as in... And I guess this is where the kind of coefficient comes in, because on that basis, you're going to have much lower quality in there just to satisfy the kind of lower people. Be like, but you can still win it if you're lucky. So it's a bit of a tricky one, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do get what you're saying, though.
You probably also need a master's degree in mathematics and a postgraduate in sports science to understand how it works anyway, to be honest. So
yeah.
I don't think anybody truly understands how it works. We just go, the coefficient, thanks.
It's like, yes, I'm top 20. It's like, what's it based on? Not a clue. But top 10. Here we go. Shall we move on to the main elements of the European Super League?
Yes.
Let's do that.
For it.
So, the first point I sort of wanted to bring up was, why don't fans want to see big clubs playing other big clubs every week?
Well, I think it's interesting. Like, they obviously don't want it, do they? Like, 89% I saw on a BBC poll were against it.
I voted in that. I was part of the 89.
There was a YouGov poll. 68% were against it, but only 14% were for it. We saw those protests outside Stamford Bridge the other night. So fans obviously don't want it, do they? Which is in. I think a big element of that is to do with the competitiveness of what you can do, what you can't do. And philosophically, I put this to you, gents. If all games are big games, well, then no games are big games, are they?
Well, I mean, I guess this is part of the dilemma, isn't it? And, I guess perhaps I'm being a little bit snobbish here, but I feel like in terms of, when you look at the teams that have joined, did join, because it's basically done now, the Super League, the English teams probably had the least to gain when you look at competitiveness of leagues.
Yeah.
As in, as in, like, for the Spanish teams, as in, like, you look at it and you kind of go, well, I guess for those teams, you look at it and go, well, the rest of them below them aren't really that competitive. Whereas, and I know it is a bit of a cliche, but the Premier League does have that kind of anyone can beat anyone vibe. And like, for example, I think the thing that's like stuck in my head is like, if you have a European Super League, what happened with Leicester doesn't happen. For me, it just doesn't.
Yeah, it's the same with West Ham this season, isn't it? Like Klopp said that the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
West Ham were in 4th place, and the neutral in the country is going, West Ham. It'd be like, back in the day, in the 60s and the 70s, when West Ham were like winning leagues. We could have West Ham in Europe. Wouldn't that be great, seeing them draw Barca or PSG?
Yeah.
You just wouldn't have that, and I think that's what's got to people so much.
You wouldn't, in the sense that, to see those teams beat all of the big teams that are in those divisions, but if you let those 6 teams dissipate and go into a different league or whatever, don't you think then you get that sort of sentimentality of, you know what, this is quite cool. We're seeing teams like West Ham genuinely win the league, or, even teams like Leeds. Leeds are at the top of the league or whatever. Do you not think by getting rid of those 6, it sort of maybe balances out a touch?
No, because I think those teams, like, we might come on to it later, the whole discussions about what you do with those 6 teams now that have tried to break away. The chairman of Aston Villa said, like, you can't do without them, really. Like, they are that big. They want to be playing the big teams. You want to be competing against teams that are fully rooted in a long history.
I think part of it as well. I mean, as in, I'm a Liverpool fan. Jack, you're a United fan. I do think there's an element of, like, for a lot of the fans who support, like Liverpool fans from Liverpool, Manchester United fans from Manchester, City fans from Manchester, and so on. I don't know what it is, but I think by playing, and I guess what you got to remember here is that it became, initially the suggestion was Super League in addition to League and Champions League. It eventually became European Super League or the others. So I think that's what you got to remember here. So when the situation became, it's the European Super League and that's it, like, a lot of those fans are thinking, well, hang on, they're becoming kind of franchises of, okay, they're based in London, but as in, they're playing half of their games on another continent, like, not continent, in another country, on another landmass. It's not really, I don't know, I feel like by becoming this sort of like massive franchise business style model, you kind of lose that kind of, between the fans, it becomes a bit of a divide between club and fans then, I guess. Like, it doesn't feel like a personal club anymore. I don't know whether that's a bit over dramatic.
No, I do see what you mean, in a sense of, by playing all of these games against teams from other nations, you barely see them play in your own nation. Especially when you consider most Man United fans don't live in Manchester. You know what I mean? Every time United have a away game, it's a home game because half their fans get to go watch their team for the one time of the year. But the same can be said for most other big teams in the Premier League. So yeah, I do see your point there. Yeah.
I guess what I mean is, by having that sort of model, it kind of dilutes the whole, it's like when, and it's like when the whole MK Dons Wimbledon thing, isn't it? Is in, like, Wimbledon, the club moved to, I can't remember where it is now, but, they
Milton
moved
Keynes,
to wherever it is.
MK.
Yeah, there you go. Makes sense. They moved to Milton Keynes, and okay, technically it's the same club, but as in they've diluted, by basically they've become this kind of franchise. So it's not really the same. That's how I think I would feel anyway if I were a Liverpool fan from Liverpool.
That makes sense. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
May I pose a sort of scenario for you?
Go on.
At present, 4 teams from the Premier League qualify for a 32-team Champions League competition. Mm-hmm. In the Champions League, you have a group stage. At most, you can be drawn with one other good team. You take Liverpool, for instance. They were drawn against Atalanta, Ajax and FC Midtjylland. They won their group. They play RB Leipzig, who finished second in their group. They win both of their legs against them. They go through to the round of 16. They play Real Madrid. They lose. Oh no, they lose one. They drew the other. They get knocked out. In total, they've played 10 games of Champions League football. of which you could only really say 2 of them were games which are worthy of Champions League status in a sense. The sort which draws a big audience in. Do you not think there needs to be some sort of middle ground where perhaps either you got to find a way of playing more teams that you want to play in a sense? Like, when you're playing teams like Midtjylland and Atalanta, do you not think there's a little bit of a Champions League is losing its aura?
Well, you've gone with the example of Liverpool, so we'll run with that. I'll put 2 things. One, in as far as the audience is concerned, it's very hard to have an audience when it's behind a paywall. I remember reading.
That's a good point. I haven't watched Champions League in a long time.
Yeah, so you'd growing up, it would be on ITV. Hasn't been on ITV in years, so you've got to seek it out on BT. I remember reading maybe 2 years ago. So that game when Liverpool beat Barca 4-0, they turned it round at Anfield. I read afterwards, despite the magnitude of that game and the quality of football on show, there was more people in the UK who watched England play Bulgaria in some qualifier.
Wow.
There was 6-7 million people watched that just because it was on free to air, whereas I think maybe 1 million people watched that game. So
that's crazy.
I heard similar stats about the Premier League because BBC got a game or 2 during the Project Restart, and I remember them saying they were the most watched Premier League games since its inception.
So you've got to take that into account. But then secondly, as someone who has an inside track on plenty of things Liverpool through family, it's really in choosing maybe you've chosen the wrong example, but I don't think there are Liverpool fans who would say that there's something about the Champions League, there's something about European games, and it's almost as if that there's something different about an atmosphere on Tuesday night and Wednesday night in the Champions League. Admittedly, this season with Atalanta and Ajax, we've not seen that because we've had stadiums closed, but you go to Anfield, you're on your feet for 90 minutes, and it doesn't matter who you're playing, because you're there to watch your team play. So you can be playing Ajax or Leipzig or Atalanta. You haven't gone to watch them. You've gone to watch your team, and because you support your team, every minute is meaningful, not just the game against Real Madrid. So if you're some neutral who's sitting at home and you're asking the question, who do they want to watch? Yeah, okay, they might not choose to. They might not choose to watch Liverpool play Midtjylland, but does the local supporter in Liverpool want to go and watch that game? Yeah, he will, because it's his club.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the thing I'd say as well is I agree with you, is in when you look at that group, it's not exactly a group you go, whoa, look at those fixtures, even as a Liverpool fan. But as in, I guess, like Dav said, obviously I've not seen Liverpool in the Champions League this season, but as a Liverpool fan, I don't think I'm any less interested in those games because of who we're playing. And I think it's also worth noting, for every season, for a season where you get a group like that, like the season where Liverpool won the Champions League, what was it last year? I can't remember. We had PSG and Napoli in our group.
Yeah, so you always get one group of death, but by and large you will usually only have one team.
But I guess what I'm saying is even in most groups, you normally have at least 2 good teams, don't you? Whereas, I feel like that group, you've got Atalanta, Ajax, and Midtjylland. I remember for years, it would be Dortmund and Real Madrid in the same group, and Bayern Munich and Arsenal in the same group.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
City and Juve in the same group. I remember that happened a few years in a row. So, I do appreciate what you're saying, but I think what Dav said is, I think for the neutral it doesn't appeal, but I think for the fans of the club, I don't think, and it's like I've said, I think it's more the occasion of the Champions League rather than necessarily the fixtures themselves that make it so exciting.
Yeah, and I don't think you want to be demeaning to these other clubs. Atalanta beat Juventus on the weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
And to be fair, Atalanta were Champions League semi-finalists last year.
Yeah, well, and Ajax were the year before that, so there isn't... a complete... It's not a complete write-off of a group. And to be fair to Midtjylland, it's looking at it from different perspectives, isn't it? For them to have a European night out at Anfield,
that's huge,
they enjoy that experience, they learn from that experience, they go and have have a good go at them. I think they drew with Liverpool in their home game, didn't they? Even though it was a bit of a dead rubber. Like, you know, it's not just. I think that's one of the difficulties with what was proposed. It's like what works for Liverpool, what makes, as far as the owners were concerned, what makes us money, how might this appeal to the neutral, how can we reach more fans. But like, I'm sure the guys at Midtjylland were probably very, very happy with this year's Champions League draw, you know? So you've got to take all that into account as well.
Well, just on another one, is the Champions League for the fans of the teams that are playing, or is it for the neutral? Because if it is for the neutral, is it for the neutral firstly? Because if it is, you know what I mean? In a sense, these games, they're a bit meh. It's like, it's great that it's good for FC Midtjylland, but the same way it's great when Newport County draws Spurs. It's great for Newport, but is it really great for the competition as a whole?
Well, do you say tomato or tomato, innit?
Yeah.
I think
half a dozen to 160.
It just depends on. It is both and, because if you say it's not for the fans, well then football's done. But obviously you would, like, from the TV's perspective, they do want neutrals and people who just like football generally to watch. So
I guess this is where the and I mean, I guess this is where the European Super League kind of dropped the ball a bit, I guess, didn't they? Like, the term legacy fans was thrown around, and it's almost like they made a decision in order to try and gain as many new fans as possible, but didn't consider how the current fans felt. So it's like you say, and I think you could make a tournament that's perhaps more appealing to, you know, the neutral by having the best teams play the best teams all the time. But as in, I think, you know, and I guess to a certain extent that would be good. I do agree with what Dav said, you know, as in, like, if they're all big games, or any of them big games, and, you know, like, for a team like Midtjylland, and again, like, you know, I think back to, like I said earlier, Leicester in the Champions League, as in I don't know, I think I get what you're saying, but
I know, I'm playing devil's advocate a lot of the time.
I
feel like somebody has to be on that side of the ballpark.
Somebody's got to stir the Hornets next day.
Moving on to sort of next point I've brought up, the domestic leagues in their current formats and how they've sort of evolved over the many years of their existence. At present, we've got Juventus, who've won 9 in a row. They are going to probably, well, I think they have lost their domestic league this year, but 9 in a row. Bayern are on 8 in a row. PSG have won 8 of the last 9, and well, probably make 8 of the last 9. The Spanish league has been won by either Madrid or Barca every year since 2013-14, and before that you have to go back to 2003-2004 when Valencia won it. It's about once in a decade that you see a team that doesn't usually dominate win these domestic leagues. You think of teams like Monaco when they beat PSG to it a few years ago, Marseille before them, Leicester in the Premier League. Atletico was that team which was sort of in the middle of that Barca Real dominance. You can even look at some of the less quote unquote major domestic leagues, non-Big Five leagues. You go to Holland in the Eredivisie, it's been Ajax or PSV every year for the last 20 bar 3. And you go to the Portuguese league, it's been Porto or Benfica every year since 2002. Do you not think there's a sort of inherent issue with domestic leagues and having teams which are over-dominant in them? Or do you think that is a part of the game and every league's going to have somebody dominant in it and it's just life in football?
I mean, I think naturally you're going to have teams that are stronger than others, aren't they? Just because, you know, success breeds success. However, I do agree with you that when you get into the point where you're having a team win 9 in a row, 8 in a row, it does. I guess you've got to start looking and going, right, what does the league need to do to kind of make it more competitive? And I guess this is where the Premier League kind of stands out from the rest. You know, as in, when you look at the winners, it does generally seem to be the top sides. You know, the top 6. But, as in, like Liverpool won it last season, City won it the previous 2 before that. Then I think it was Chelsea, then it was Leicester, you know, as in, like, it's never.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Jack.
team
I
sit-
saw a stat that only that Man City example you've just given, only once since the 2009-10 season has a team won the Premier League consecutively. So, in the
Yeah.
last 10 years, you had 5 different winners of the Premier League, and only once has it been back to back. Well, that's a quarter of the league have got a chance at the start of the season, kind of thing. Like, that's pretty good, isn't it? As football leagues go, because
Yeah,
not everyone.
I would definitely say the Premier
can
League's
win,
one of the
innit?
best for it.
Yeah.
It's true.
I mean, I guess there's an element as well, as in you can't. I think you're never going to have a league where every team has a completely equal chance of winning. I don't think that exists. So I think.
No, but do you not think
And
there's such an imbalance at this stage where you're getting teams winning it this many times? I mean, I've got the quote sort of later on in my notes, but Nadal's won 13 of 16 French Opens he's been at. That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to these domestic leagues, especially when you see the imbalance in some of them in terms of the resources they have, do you not think there's structurally something wrong which needs to change in them?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Premier League has got it spot on, but clearly the Premier League are doing something that the others don't. I think the distribution of finance is a big thing. Even the teams that are kind of mid to bottom of the Premier League table can still make, significant big money signings. Obviously not to the extent of Liverpool, United, City, Chelsea, etc. But as in they can still compete.
Yeah, I think though we've got to be careful that we don't isolate this in the exact moment we're living in. So Juventus actually didn't win the Serie A from 2002 to 2011. So if we were having this discussion 10 years ago, it's conceivable we could have been saying, "Oh, Juventus, are they? Maybe they're past their best actually." But then from 2014 on, they hit. Just year after year, it didn't help that the Milan clubs started to struggle with that. I mean, you've got to think, haven't you? If you were having this conversation 20 years ago, Man City or Chelsea wouldn't have been involved in this discussion. Spurs probably wouldn't have been. We'd have been talking about Newcastle United and Blackburn playing Barcelona and Real Madrid. So, yeah, I agree. I do agree what you say, Jack, in regards to other leagues, and there needs to be maybe a better distribution of TV money and sponsorship and all of that. But I do think it's interesting that in one of those examples you gave with Bayern, obviously, they, apart from Dortmund giving them a run a couple of years ago, they've dominated the Bundesliga. Yet they obviously don't have a problem. They were not involved with any ESL discussions in any way. I mean,
to be fair, that's probably one of the best leagues for distributing wealth as well. I think after the Premier League, there seems to be a much more balance. You've got at least 7 or 8 teams competing for Champions League, and some, a few of them given a pop at Bayern every year at least. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no. It is a fair point, and I mean, that comes on to something that maybe we'll touch on later about the way that clubs are owned and the future of what things look like. They've got a different structure up there, haven't they? Where it's 51% fan ownership.
Yeah.
So is that a coincidence? Probably not.
Fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a valid point you say about the, it's easy to kind of look at the recent success, as in really in the grand scheme of things, 9 years isn't a long time in the lifespan of a football club, is it, or a league for that matter. I mean, I do feel like there's been a bit of a, in the last sort of 20 years, the boom in terms of finance and sponsorship and fees from money does seem to have kind of exploded. I mean, particularly in the Premier League, when you look at the sort of money that the clubs get now through, like the TV packages and stuff is just bonkers. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you said as well, Jack, as in it looks like that run for Juve is gonna end this year. Could that be, as in, could Juve not win it for another 2 or 3 years? And And I guess you got to look at it and go, well, is it a case that they need to make the league more competitive, or is it just a case that Juventus really are that good that they can win it 9 times in a row, and Bayern Munich are that good that they're deserving of winning it 8 times in a row?
Fair point. We've spoken on money then. We sort of brought that into the conversation, so it's sort of just quite nicely move us on to the next sort of point I've got in here.
We're good at this podcast, Malark, aren't we?
We spoke, well, you spoke about new money coming into particularly into the Premier League when Sky popped around and said, hey, we'll give you a ton of money for the Premier League rights back in 1992 or whatever. Do you think that's sort of, up to that point, it was quite even? To be fair, I don't know much about what happens before 1992 because I wasn't born until 1997. They got 5 years on me where I didn't even know what was going on in the world. But in a sense, at 1992, do you think at that point football almost had a restart switch with a bit of a delay on it? Where you see at the beginning it was Man United. They win 7 of the first 9 Premier Leagues. Because if you win the first one, you're going to get the most money, and it sort of snowballs from there. It's like, well, you're going to get the next, you're continually going to get the most money, so it just kind of means you're always going to have more money to spend. Eventually, they make the best 11, best team they can make. So there's no way really that they can improve on that squad anymore. So it sort of filters down, and Arsenal join the party. They make a good 11. They win it for 2 years, maybe 3 years here or there. Then along comes Russian money and Mr. Abramovich. Then comes the Emirates with Man City. Then comes the Americans at Liverpool. And it's like over time we're seeing more and more money come into the league. And you sort of getting another big team, well, another made team at the top in a sense, another team which joins that elite bracket of clubs. I mean, we're seeing it now with teams like Leicester, Wolves sort of joining into the fray of the Big 6 going on Big 8. Do you think that this is sort of just something which is that delayed sort of reset switch I was on about, where those sort of teams at the top, there's a gap between them and everybody else because of the money, and in a sense, over time, eventually all of these clubs, you look maybe in 5 years' time, you might see Leeds and Villa catch back up, maybe Everton as well, and then it'll just gradually cycle down until all of the Premier Leagues got all of them are super competitive, and it's a competitive league once again. Not even thinking about the other 72 teams which exist in the Football League pyramid. Do you think that this is just an issue which they can't really get around because money is just, it's going to take time to trickle all the way down?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's tricky as well because, like you said, how it kind of went in steps, and you had Abramovich come in, and you had I think it's Sheikh Mansour, isn't it, for Man City, come in for them. And then since then, because of financial regulations, as in, other teams have kind of joined the party, but it's in, like, when you look at how Leicester have done it, they've kind of, they won the league, they struggled for a year or so, but then they've kind of gradually built, and it's not necessarily been through enormous spending, it's been more of a kind of organic growth, isn't it? But I guess that's part of the benefit of the league system, isn't it? Is that eventually, through being more competitive, the money kind of filters down through all of the clubs, not just the top teams. And I guess that's where you have the benefit of the kind of sponsorship money and the TV stuff, aside from where you finish in the league. Because obviously then, like, teams towards the bottom, okay, they may not get as much for their positioning, but then they do get a significant amount for the TV rights and stuff as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect model, obviously, but I do think it's okay, I guess. Dad, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is hard to see, isn't it, where you kind of go from here, in the sense of you can, over time, seeing the quality of the squads that Leicester, and you only want Ancelotti to have a couple of seasons at Everton. You'd like to think what that squad will be like. So you could end up. I've always kind of seen the Premier League as basically being 3 mini leagues. You've got like who's competing for the European places. Then there's best of the rest, and then there's always a bottom 5, maybe 6 for the relegation, and every year it more or less works out like that. And I think, yeah, you make a good point, Jack, that over time you might end up having like 10 teams competing for those top 6, 7 places, and that is going to drive. The money has such a impact on it. I don't think it's a coincidence. I know we'll come and talk about the Premier League later on, but it's no coincidence, is it, that the teams that are at the bottom of the league at the moment, 2 of those 3 have come up last. They came up this season, and resource-wise, it is a real struggle. But then that comes back to how do you...
At some stage, you're going to see that all of 20 teams are going to, in a sense, it's just going to have to have trickled down enough that eventually you're going to see teams that, like, equivalent of Wolves at the moment in the Premier League falling into the Championship, and the guys in the Championship are going to have no hope against them at some stage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, there have been points where that's kind of happened already. Like when... maybe not quite to the same extreme, but as in, like, you think of when, like, QPR kind of were in that kind of stage in the Premier League / Championship, as in, you were looking at some of the players that, and unlike when Newcastle got relegated, you were looking at some of the players that Newcastle had, and you were like, they're probably a bit too good to be in the Championship, aren't they? And, like, I guess, I'm trying to think of what other team, I just had a team in mind, but I've completely forgotten.
So,
yeah, exactly, and you had these kind of teams that were... you were looking at some of the players they had, and you were like, well, last season, okay, they may not necessarily be, like, top of the Premier League, but then you were like, that's a solid Premier League player there, and they're playing in the Championship. So I definitely think that at some point you're going to have this kind of... It is going to filter through, I guess. I just think it'll be a question of, I think John Barnes was saying something the other day about how football generally needs more kind of like auditing of clubs, financial caps, and that sort of thing. I think that the big change is going to be what sort of, and I guess as a result of this kind of European Super League saga, are there going to be things that they bring in to kind of regulate clubs more, so that it isn't just a case of clubs go in for as much wealth as possible rather than staying in competitive football. I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, I can agree any more to say on that. That's a really good point. Got anything to add, Dav?
No. I just think it's a case of, thinking about those kind of things, isn't it? Like in the rugby Premiership, they do have salary caps, and it's looking at that's the only other way that you can. Instead of allowing the richer clubs to get richer indefinitely, that's the only other way that you can try and ensure a bit more parity and evenness. I mean, most clubs are where they are, aren't they, because of the money of their owners, like you mentioned, Abramovich and whatever. Like, it's fair to say that most clubs that have got their success, okay, maybe in the past it was kind of done through... I'm not saying that, Man City are obviously talented, but they've been able to buy talent. Money just does so much, doesn't it? Would Man City be where they are if Sheikh Mansour had never come and invested? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
What I'm saying is, Man City can be held up as they might win the quadruple this year, but is their model sustainable, like as a business? Unless you've got someone who's very happy to plough millions into it. Well, that's not sustainable. That's just somebody being kind. Which is, good for them. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's just not sustainable, is it?
And it's not just City. As in, like, I think of, like, as a Liverpool fan, as in for a long time Liverpool were kind of or breed talent in-house kind of scenario, but ultimately, Abramovich comes in and basically completely shakes up what's happening in the Premier League. And then for a team like Liverpool and like United as well, as in, unfortunately, the only way you are going to compete for a Premier League is by spending big money year on year. And, that's I'm not saying that's the only reason Liverpool won a title, but as in you've got to look at the investment that Liverpool have made. You know, as in they're paying 70 odd million for a goalkeeper. Well, you know, sort of 10 years ago, that's unheard of.
So, I mean, De Gea was a 30 odd mil signing,
and that was big at the time. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking
money,
of money, we have just spoken of it. Obviously, you see some of the leagues. We're talking about salary caps. Leagues in America, in particular, they don't really focus on money as the great differentiator between good and bad teams. It's sort of more of a Commonwealth approach where everyone gets an equal split of the TV money and, say, shirt sales and ticket revenues and all that. That's a sort of, that's where if you want to make more money than the others, you do. But it's never about money in those leagues. It's more so about things like draft picks. So do you think a model where, in a sense, money wasn't an issue could work? It'd be really difficult to implement it, particularly into a pyramid system like we have. But say, for instance, I'm trying to think of how you could implement it, which is really difficult, because if you're going to have a fluid league system where you get promotion and relegation and a model where money doesn't matter, it's kind of impossible. But do you not think something like I know we don't like the idea of no relegation, but do you not think some sort of equal opportunity for all, almost like they have in cricket, where they brought in that Big Bash? I don't know if you, I think it was Big Bash or something like that. I don't know if you're into your cricket and all that. I'm not particularly into it, but they kind of just took all of these big players and started a new competition with new teams in different regions. You know, they had like the Celtic Dragons for Wales and stuff like that. Like, do you not think they could make some sort of league where they, in a sense, draft people instead of pay for them, and that way then there's no wealth inequality and everyone's got an equal chance? Bit of a mouthful of that question.
Well, go on, Dav, you go first. I've gone first, so I'll ask you questions.
I think it's one of those things
voice.
which, like, you say it on paper and you think, oh yeah, maybe that could work, but it's the whole closed shop thing. Like, the whole no relegation is such a big, like Pep Guardiola said, didn't he, that if it's not sport, if success is guaranteed. So, like, you know, we take Pep's word and say thanks, Pep. We'll stop the conversation there, because I think at the end of the day, because of how deep rooted the system is, like, you've got this pyramid system, you know, 90 plus different teams, that's 90 plus communities, towns, cities, etc. are so deep rooted. Like you say, like, Jack, it is basically impossible, and yeah, I think it is, because for you to do that, to take some kind of franchise system, like you say about the cricket, like even with like the county level that we have, there's 18 counties, and it's quite a closed system, isn't it? Whereas at the moment you could have a team in the 9th or 10th tier of football, and you could have dreams that one day you'll be in the league. There's like a different setup in football, isn't there? That, like, you can be playing for your local club, which might be really small, but you might over many seasons be able to get to League 2 or something. That's the kind of pyramid system that we have, which I don't know the history of the NFL, but I would imagine that, like, because they decided at the very beginning this is how we're going to work, it can work, but I don't think you can transfer that across, because recently Wrexham have been bought over, haven't they, by those American actors. Well, like, that's their dream now, isn't it? Like, we're going to go places, we're going to get to the top, and who's to stop the good people of Wrexham dreaming? What a scandal if you closed it up and said you haven't got the opportunity to be able to get to the Premier League, like. So
yeah, I mean, I just think there's too many obstacles to it, isn't there?
But at the same time, you've got teams like two-time champions, European Cup winners Nottingham Forest, founding members of the Football League in Accrington, Aston Villa and Wolves. I think Notts County, who are out of the Football League entirely. Bolton Wanderers almost went into liquidation. Do you not think that there are some merits to the no relegation rule? Like, you've got some of these historic clubs which are supported by huge fan bases, and they could fall out of love with the beautiful game purely because they have a dodgy owner here or there. I mean, we spoke just then about Wrexham having, a bit of optimism because now they've got a new American owner or owners. But do you not think there could be a place for certain teams or maybe to have some sort of protection?
I mean, are you a fan if you fall out of love with the beautiful game? Just throw that grenade in there.
I'm saying more in the sense of, if they're liquidated, they can't be a fan of that team. And it's like, well, if you're all of your associations with that team, where'd you go? What's your next step?
Yeah, but that's a different issue, though, to not having relegation, isn't it?
Okay.
Because Notts County still exist.
And I do think as well, as in, I agree with what you're saying, as in terms of protection. But as in, let's not forget, when you get relegated from the Premier League, you get a large sum of money for a good few years, the parachute payments, as in, surely the whole point of that is, and I think a lot of the time teams see it as, we got to use this money straight away to get back into the Premier League. But I guess there is a scenario where, okay, maybe you need to use that money, invest it in the club, and go, right, okay, well, we may not get back to the Premier League straight away, but we're going to secure our safety with that money. And I do think that's part of the parcel of the parachute payments, to be honest. And I do kind of get what you're saying, but ultimately, as in sport, is competitive. Every time someone wins, someone has got to lose. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I do think, if you are a fan of those clubs, as in, it's a tricky place to be. And in this scenario of Bolton Wanderers, like, just because they went into administration, that's not necessarily because of the relegation. As in, like, Liverpool went into administration in the Premier League, so as in, I think there's an element of, I guess what I'm saying is, teams, there's a lot of leagues to drop down before a club goes out of existence, and I think if you drop in that far down, clearly as a club something has gone wrong, and I think at that point then it's not necessarily the league's responsibility to dig that club out.
I don't think anyone has a divine right to be in the Premier League, though, do they? No. I mean, Arsenal and Everton are the only two teams in history that have never been relegated from the top division. So basically, if you support a football club, chances are they've not always been in the top division. And you've only got to look at the Premier League now to look at it from the other way. You talk about these teams that have dropped down. You look at teams that are in the Premier League now. Brighton, in 2010, they win League One. Wolves, 2013, they win League One. Leeds, they win League One 2010. Same as Southampton. Man City, they were there in the late 90s. And then...
recently Sheffield
as well.
Yeah,
Sheffield United. And then, you look at those teams at the top of the Championship who've been in the Premier League in recent history. Norwich, Bournemouth, Swansea. They've all been in League Two, some of them. So, yeah, they're in the Premier League, maybe at the expense of your Notts Forests and, Accrington Stanley. But I think that's, like you say, Jack, that's sport, isn't it? And you've got to have that ability to dream and to go from League One to the Premier League. Why not? Nobody thought Bournemouth could do it, but they did, and what a story,
It's good points.
And I guess as well, there is I guess this is where it's difficult, because football is one of those weird sports where, like, NFL is very kind of not business orientated, but you get what I mean. Is in, like, a lot of decisions, like, for example, the Raiders this season have moved from, or the season just gone, I should say, moved from one city to a completely... Where were they? Because they're Las Vegas
Oakland.
now, aren't they?
They were in Oakland, which was pretty near Las Vegas, but not really.
Yeah, but as in, it would be like Liverpool moving from Liverpool to Manchester, as in geographically it's not particularly far, but as in, if that happened in football, they would be outraged. So I guess in NFL they are kind of in their nature they are franchises, and I guess that's like Dav said, that's because that's how they were set up pretty like fairly early on. So I think there's this balance between kind of you've got to have the financial side, but also, like Pep Guardiola said, it is still a sport. And I think sometimes there's a danger if you do make it, like certain teams can't be relegated, do you lose that kind of sport element in favour of business and finance and money and stuff? So yeah, that would be my thoughts, I guess.
It's fair enough. On that sort of Pep Guardiola quote about, I can't remember someone remind me what the quote exactly was. Anybody got that?
It's not a sport if success is guaranteed.
Thanks for playing that. Thanks for playing that video, Dav.
He was a bit Italian then for a second, wasn't he? I don't know what came over him then.
But on that sort of, just going on to other sports in particular, one of the good things that we like most about football is that it's equal in the form of it's 11 on 11. Do you think when you look at other sports, particularly people always talk about financial doping in a sense in cycling, where it's pretty much a guarantee that Team Sky or Ineos are going to win the Tour de France, or you see sports like the Formula One where it's a guarantee that it's going to be Red Bull or Mercedes or Ferrari because they've just got a better engine at the beginning. Do you not think maybe is that statement entirely true? Do you think relegation genuinely is the big divider in terms of it's no longer competitive if there's no relegation? Because these other sports, in a sense, have things which football doesn't have, and they're still competitive.
Yeah.
You could still definitely call them sports as such. But, yeah, it's just something that came to my mind whilst we were chatting about it then. That lots of other sports have things which perhaps we don't have in ours where, one team doesn't play with 12 players and another team plays with 10. There's inequalities in all sports, in a sense. You'll think, maybe not the relegation rule is probably the wrong one to go with. But in terms of those sports, are they not, would you call them less competitive than, say, football because they've got it's not 11 on 11 in a sense?
I'll ring Pep and ask him.
I mean, I think I agree with what you're saying, that's not the only thing that defines what a sport is, but I think there is an element of, if you're one of the bottom teams in the Premier League where you can't get relegated, like, what is your motivation? Like, if you're right at the bottom, like, if there's relegation, you've got to scrap to survive. Like, if there's no relegation and you're that bottom team, you just think, all right, well, don't worry, lads, we'll just go next year. And, I guess that's where you come down to, how do you define a sport, I guess. But, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, just a passing question. Didn't really
have
much leads off of it, but
no, you are right. But as in, I guess competition, and sport, a big part of it is you have winners and you have losers, and I think if you basically eliminate the fact that you're not really getting, I mean, obviously you'll have losers to each game, but as in, I think it is part of, it's a motivator, isn't it? If you're at the bottom of the table, it's a motivator to keep you in the league. If you're at the top of the table below and there's the chance that you could get promoted, that is a big motivator, and therefore it kind of encourages competition, I guess.
Well, something just sprang to mind. Italy in the Six Nations or Georgia in the second division of the Six Nations.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. That's the perfect scenario where you've got a team who, for years now, because there's no sort of relegation or promotion, have just been kind of lingering and nothing, they're not really getting any better. If anything, they're getting worse.
So you calling for the end of the Six Nations? Do you hate the Six Nations in its entirety? Because it doesn't have relegation.
Stop it now. In all seriousness, on a side note, I do think there should be promotion relegation in the Six Nations. I've come to that conclusion. But
cool.
Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's
back
good.
to football.
Yeah, well, I do have a next point, which is on about how can football, in a sense, regain some of its competitiveness. But in terms of going back to the European Super League as a topic, does anybody really have any burning points they want to make about the competition in general, in terms of how it's laid out, or in terms of what their thoughts on the teams or anything in particular?
I think just the one thing, like we've discussed a lot of the points from a sporting perspective and competition, which is, it's a fair enough question to discuss, like how would it work from a footballing point of view. But like at the end of the day, the combined debt of these 12 clubs is hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds, and it's interesting. Perez, the president, is he, of Real Madrid, is a big proponent of this. So the financial model that they work to is really crumbled over the last year with a lack of money coming in because of the whole COVID situation. So at the moment, he knows it's laughable to be talking about trying to buy Mbappe or Haaland because they just haven't got the finances to do it. So I think like it's just worth underlining that you can discuss the merits of this from a sporting perspective, but this was well and truly all about money.
Of course it was, yeah. It's a business.
Yeah. These guys who own these clubs, they're not billionaires for no reason at all. Like, they know how to make money. And on Monday morning, Juventus's share price went up by 14%, and United's went up by 8.5%.
Wow.
After the discussions on Sunday, Monday morning, Juventus's value went up by like a sixth, just like that. So this was like, this was the big money maker. And so I think that's just got to be put out there, isn't it? There was, the questions that you've asked, Jack, about how, the sporting aspect of it and how you could, the competitive nature of European leagues, like those are good questions. But I don't think Perez and the president of Juventus, they weren't sitting there going, "Oh, guys, you know what? It's not competitive enough, this league. We need some more action." That was not their priority. Their priority was, how can we grow our bank balance?
Well, yeah, and to be honest, I think if they have said that, because I'm sure I've read quotes saying that, they're just talking. Like Perez has said, like, who doesn't want to see the best teams play the best teams? It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But as in, like, if they're really saying that that's their motivation, they're just lying through their teeth. Like, it's like you said, Daph, it is purely a money-making scheme.
If he's serious about saving football and getting kids watching football, which is one of his points, he'll work harder to make football more accessible and free to air.
Exactly, yeah. And there's a part of me that thinks, as in like, like as I read something, they said basically he was talking about the finances, and he said, like our operational budget has been 900 million for this long, and because of the pandemic and things, it's now 600 million. And you kind of look at it and going like, there are so many clubs in the world that kind of look at it and go, welcome to the real world. Yeah. Like, the majority of clubs don't have millions upon millions to spend on players. Like, boo-hoo for you, deal with it. As in, that's part of sport. As in, you can't just solve everything with more money. And, he's saying, we want to see the best teams play the best teams. How about Real Madrid don't buy every single piece of talent that crops up in La Liga and then just store it away? Like, you think of the amount of players that, like, Madrid signed because they were good for a team the season before, and then they don't even, like, make their bench. Like, I remember when Madrid signed, like, a Yara Mendy for, like, 38 million. He didn't even play. Who else? They signed, like, Isco from... Yeah, exactly. Odegaard. Isco for many years. Like, they bought Isco, but he was, like, the best player for Malaga. He was, like, one of their best players for that season. And then, like, I would say for at least 3/4 of the following season, he didn't even start. James Rodriguez. They buy James Rodriguez for crazy money. He has one season there, is considered a flop, and then he gets loaned out. Like, how about you don't just, like, spend crazy money on players and just nab them from all the teams, and then you'll have a more competitive league. It's like you say, Dav, as in if he wants, if he wants to save football, how about he tries restructuring the things that are currently wrong rather than being like, right, we'll just do something that makes us more money. So frustrating.
Well, you asked for a burning point there, Jack. I think you got it.
Sorry, I thought, well, I'll get it out now because there's a potential that this I won't get a chance to rant about this again.
We look forward to Mr. Perez's response.
He'll be on Spanish TV tomorrow. Don't worry.
So if you join us next week, we'll be joined by Florentino Perez himself.
Just as a sort of a recap. Well, not a recap. An end point for the Super League in a sense. Would you guys be opposed to a Super League in all forms in the future, in a sense, ignoring no relegation rules or anything? There is relegation, there is a promotion system and all that, and it's not just purely for monetary reasons. Would you guys be against a Super League?
Is it instead of or as well as domestic?
Instead of.
No.
It's as a part of, but you wouldn't be competing in your own, in a sense. So you would be promoted from the Premier League to the Super League if you qualify, in a sense. Like the way I'm envisioning it is, let's say you took the top 4 at the moment. Not West Ham. Assume it's someone better.
Or West Ham fans.
No, okay.
Kick it off.
Let's say you take some 4 good teams from the Premier League, and you take your 3 good ones from the Spanish league, and in a sense all those teams which are dominating their leagues to the point where it's uncompetitive. You take all of them, you put them in a league, and every year the winners of the domestic leagues from all of the leagues across Europe will go into some sort of mass playoff, and you win your mass, or say the top 3 in some sort of league format for those guys, then all qualify to get promoted, and the bottom 3 of that Super League go back to their original leagues. Would you not be for something like that, where there is still that promotion relegation element, but you wouldn't be going up there almost like a sheep to the wolves, in a sense, like a team like AZ Alkmaar going up into the Super League, and it's like, well, good luck. You know what I mean? Not like cannon fodder, but a genuine competitive Super League. Would you be for or against?
Is there not, without wanting to sound sassy, is that not what the Champions League kind of does already?
No,
when you think about it.
Nah, because
but if you,
in a sense they're still playing domestic. That's the issue. I'm finding a way to get them out.
Yeah, but what's wrong with them playing domestic?
What, currently? The imbalance. In a sense, it's unequal for everybody else.
But as in, I don't think creating another league solves the imbalance of the leagues below. Surely the problem is that those leagues themselves need to work out a way to make it more balanced. And it's like Dav said, as in, like, okay, they may appear imbalanced at the moment, like for the Italian league, for example, but as in, if Juve don't win the league this year, who knows what's going to happen next year? As in, AC Milan have started to pick up again. Inter Milan are looking competitive for the first time probably in about 6 or 7 years. I guess what I'm saying is, I feel like by creating a Super League, I feel like it just detracts from the Champions League, in all honesty. Because I feel like surely some of them, like for Liverpool this season now.
What if it replaced the Champions League as well?
No, you can't.
You've still got the Champions League in a sense, but you don't qualify for it by finishing top 4 in your leagues or whatever. You qualify it as at the end of the Super League, in a sense. You go into the Champions League.
For me, by having a Super League, it's going back to what Dav said. I think by having a Super League, if all games are big games, then no games are big games. Like, the whole excitement of the Champions League is like, for example, when Liverpool get Barcelona in the semi-finals for the first time in nearly a decade. That's what makes the Champions League so exciting. By pitting them up against, I know obviously if you're having promotion and relegation, generally you're going to get you're going to get a bit of variety, but ultimately the teams at the top are probably going to stay fairly similar. I guess the only thing you're dealing with then the moral issue of promotion and relegation. But then, if you're kind of having promotion and relegation and teams dropping in and out, for me, it fulfills the same role as the Champions League, because the Champions League, you know, each year you get different teams qualifying via the automatic positions and then through the playoff rounds, and then you go into a knockout competition with the best teams that are left. So I'm gonna say, for me, I don't see the point of a Super League, to be honest. Obviously, there's the financial benefits, etc. But from purely a footballing perspective, I think all it would do is detract from the Champions League.
I think it's interesting as well, isn't it? You had no players who came out in support of this.
But do you not think they didn't come out in support because of that no relegation rule? Because I think a lot of people really weren't on board with that.
Yes. I
do you not think if they were in a Super League which did have relegation, they'd go, you know, it's inevitable. Football's got to adapt and evolve in some way to, you know, be better. Well, what's your thoughts on a Super League? Would you ever be for one, Dav?
I'm not convinced, to be honest, because I don't. It's the two ways you look at it. Like, if you're looking at it from like the big club perspective, but like I genuinely don't think. There might be a little bit of rumblings, but genuinely, the response of fans in this last week has been what it has been, because you want to be playing your domestic leagues. You haven't got teams from, you haven't got your fans of Leeds and Brighton and Burnley and Wolves. I haven't seen a lot of sentiment which has been, oh, good riddance. Yeah, you jog on. We'll have our own league, thanks. You want to be playing all together, and you want to be going up against the best, and you want to be playing against those good teams from your own country, and you want to be pushing them, and you want to be playing against the best. So, I think if it was something, if what you're describing was something along the lines of trying to improve a Champions League, or making tweaks to it, or I'm not against, because the Champions League wasn't a thing until like 20 odd years ago, was it? Whenever it was. So obviously, yeah, you're right. Football does have to continually look to adapt and change and whatever, but in a way that I think as well stays consistent with, stays with the fans, which is what we've seen the last few days, and remembering ultimately that, like, what is it that is success? Is it sounds stupid to say maybe, but is success winning? Is success making money? Most football supporters across the country support clubs that maybe have never won a trophy. They might not make a lot of money, but they're a key part of a local community. They're a key part of a lot of people's lives, and that's success for them. So I think we've got to see it from not just a big club or from a neutral's perspective, but also from the smaller clubs across the country as well, and think, well, maybe that team in League Two, maybe Wrexham want to play Man City one day. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, they can if they qualify for the Super League. Get up there, boys. Never happening. Okay. Well, impassioned speech.
There is one. Well, there is one thing I'd like to say though, is that I do think that the Champions League isn't perfect. I'm not saying that the Champions League is perfect, therefore leave it alone.
What could be improved? Out of curiosity.
Oof. Well, I mean,
in terms of obvious flaws.
Well, I mean, they've recently announced that it's going to be expanded, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessary, to be honest. There's been many discussion about the away goal rule. Mm-hmm. Very simple thing. Does it detract from the competition?
Oh, quickly, for or against, both of you? The away goal rule? I'm against the away goal rule. I don't see its purpose.
I'm for it when it benefits Liverpool, and against it when it goes against. To be honest with you, it's a tricky one because I do think it is gimmicky. I do think that in some ways it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it does not mean that we get some dramatic moments. So I'm a little bit torn, to be honest with you.
I guess the idea of it is obviously that you are trying to give a team some kind of incentive to not go away from home and park the bus.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Do you think that would happen without an away goal rule?
Well, they must have brought it in for that reasoning.
Yes, that could... I don't know when it came in.
It's one of those, don't get me wrong, it's one of those where sometimes you think, oh, that's a bit silly, or like how frustrating that they've gone out on away goals. But... Yeah, I don't know. I think that is one of those, isn't it? Like, you know, if you've ended up winning a Champions League because you scraped through some quarter final through an away goal, you're not going to complain, are you? So I don't know if that would make I don't know if that makes a big difference to the competition as a whole, though. Does it as a structure? It just changes the games in and of themselves.
Fair. Going back to the notes, in a sense, moving on to what we're talking about. In terms of regaining its competitiveness, would you like to see any rules introduced? I did note in the notes that the MLS has a Beckham rule, where teams all have a salary cap in the MLS because they're sort of trying to copy the NFL's model, but in a natural, organic way. And the way they're doing it is you've got your salary cap for all your players, but you can purchase or you can have 3 players on your squad which don't count towards a salary cap. Do you guys like the idea of a rule like that in the Premier League, where only a certain number of players can, say, be paid more than the £300,000 a week?
Oh, that's a hardship, isn't it? That, gosh, only 300 grand a week. Yeah, I think generally something like that is going to have to. I wouldn't be against that in some form. It would have to be tapered in over a period of time, because you can't just say next season.
Yeah,
you know. I mean, the clubs
half the squad's getting like a 50%.
Yeah,
exactly.
Have
no players. Yeah.
Clubs that are run well generally do have a wage structure, don't they? That.
Yes, I think. One club recently was going to break its wage structure for a player, and they actually declined. It might have been Arsenal. I think Aubameyang might have wanted an amount of money which just wasn't in fitting with what the rest of the squad was being paid, so they said no on it. But continue your point. Sorry, should have interrupted it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in those instances, clubs do that. They're trying to be financially responsible, and you want the best players to come and play for your club, so you're going to offer them good money. But when you can offer loads of, you know, because one club happens to be owned by a rich guy, he can offer a massive salary to his whole team, his whole first 11, whereas another club could only theoretically offer that money to like 4 players. And the only difference, therefore, is who's the guy backing you behind the desk. Well, it would be good to maybe be able to even that out a little bit. What do people do with 300 grand a week anyway?
I would struggle to spend £300,000 a week. That would be a struggle. I don't know what I would spend it on. Because once you've bought a house, what's next? It's like a car, then you're onto helicopters next. It's like you're really struggling in terms of just going to run out instantly. Not run out, we'll rather have too much to get a handle of it.
If you save enough, you could buy a football club. To be honest with you, I would say I don't know about the specifics of that salary cap, but definitely a salary cap I think would be, in some shape or form, would be good, personally.
Fair enough. What about, one place I read had a suggestion of bringing in squad size limits. I don't know what that would do per se. I don't know whether he was insinuating that you just have like a certain number of English players or domestic players. Would you like any sort of reduced squad size or anything like that?
I mean, I'm not. I think if you're, I've seen there's been suggestions about that, hasn't there, with like the FA and developing talent and whatever. But I don't know. Like that doesn't really, because if you've got a pot of money, if you've just got less players, you'll just pay them more.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You'd probably need more detail on what they're meaning about like the limiting of a squad size, because if you're competing on a few different fronts, you need a decent sized squad to be able to do that.
You probably need more than 3 starting centre backs for the season.
Well, Liverpool will tell you about that.
Liverpool.
That was an unnecessary shot, that really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Going on to the Super League clubs, then the league's over. It's finished. Do you think they should be punished anywhere? I know we've said before that we perhaps don't want them to... Well, the other clubs, particularly in the league, don't want them to be relegated because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's those 6 clubs that probably bring in the biggest amount of money to the league. They make the league what it is in terms of its appeal to the broader audiences. But would you like to see something like a 1-year Champions League ban or transfer bans or fines? Anything in particular that you think they should be faced with because of their sort of greediness?
I think if they were going to be faced with anything, I'd want it to be something that impacted the owners as opposed to the players. So, you had the Liverpool players out on Monday night. They played Leeds, and like James Milner's there going, "Oh, I don't like it. Didn't know anything about it before yesterday." So, I think it's fair enough to say that the players and the managers had no involvement in any of this. So if anything that would affect them, like, why shouldn't they be allowed to play in the Champions League because of some decision some small group of guys has made somewhere? Why should they be thrown out of the Premier League because of, I don't think it's anything that they've done in particular. So I wouldn't want... I mean, I can understand why people might say it, but I would think that's a little bit harsh. But then you wouldn't want these owners to get away with it either. You could argue like, throw them out of the Premier League, then they'll struggle financially. But then that would be harsh on the players possibly. But I don't know, like I suppose a transfer ban or some kind of fine, but it would have to be a pretty big fine, to be honest, to hit a top 6 Premier League club. Yeah. A transfer ban, does that hurt the club's chances of winning a trophy or something? Possibly. So I'm not against the idea of some kind of consequence for it. Like, I think that there should be, but I think it would be harsh on your poor James Milners of the world, or all the players to be honest. Like Rashford, De Bruyne, all the different clubs, they came out and said we're not fans of it. We don't want this. We weren't told anything about it. So it'd be a bit harsh on them to not be able to play in Europe next season, for example, just because of that.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Yeah, I agree, Dev, to be honest with you. I think it's it is a tricky one though, because it's like, how do you as in, like, looking at the things you put down there, as in my initial one is like a fine. I think what you said is right, Dav, as in like what sort of fine you're going to have to give a top 6 Premier League club is going to have to be astronomical. And, again, does that then impact, not directly obviously, but then does that indirectly impact, their spending for the next summer transfer window? And then at that point then it is impacting the team, I guess. So I agree that there should be some form of punishment. What that punishment will be is a bit trickier.
What would be fun is if you gave them all, like, I don't know, a 25, 30 point deduction. So they're going to get enough points in the season to stay up. But it would just be such a nervy season, wouldn't it? They're probably... It's
like, you guys are 10 games behind, assuming you win them all.
Yeah, so you're going to get to about... They'll probably would, in a normal season, they'd hit 60 to 70 points. So if you gave them a 25 points deduction, they'd probably get just enough to scrape in to stay up. But that would be a fun watch, wouldn't it?
You'd see some absolute pummelings though of some teams. You'd see City go out there and hold nothing back. They'd be... I mean, I put in the notes as a stat, Burnley have lost. Well, have been to the last 4 trips they've had to the Etihad. They've lost all of them 5-0. It's like you just see City go out there and tear teams to shreds. Just almost like, yeah, we're not even taking a chance here. We are not getting relegated. We're going to destroy someone today, and it'd just be like it'd be an expose on how to beat a team. Pep Guardiola would go crazy, I think, of his options in terms of what he'll end up doing to everybody. Oh, I'd love to see it though. Would love to see the panic in their eyes. Going on then, should we move on to our next topic? I mean, note we're an hour and a half of the way through. We've got 2 topics to go.
Nice.
In terms of, well, the next thing I put was Mourinho getting sacked. 17 months at the helm.
Under the radar, really, wouldn't it?
It
after
has.
The shenanigans.
Do you think Daniel Levy sacked him to sort of... Because he did it the exact same day, or the day after, rather, the Super League was announced. Do you think he did it, to take some of the heat off?
I mean, it's difficult to know for sure, obviously. I mean, there were rumours, I don't know how true they are, that, like, Mourinho basically told his players that, like, we're not going out for training because of the announcement. I don't know how true that is. Possibly... how do you judge it? As in, like, because ultimately, then this was something that that was mentioned on like different media outlets. As in, his form wasn't particularly great with Spurs currently. So there is an element to which, was it literally just based purely on league form? Possibly. I don't think it was done with the intent of just drawing attraction away from the Super League stuff, but it may have been linked, I guess.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
What about you, Dav? Do you think it was a cynical sacking, or do you think it was about right, considering the situation Spurs are in?
Well, yeah, I think the timing of it is odd, isn't it? Just before cup final, like
6 days.
Yeah, I can't.
It is weird.
I can't imagine that Spurs are going to. They're really betting on the new manager bounce there, aren't they? Like, I can't imagine Spurs are going to be much better without him. Come Sunday,
especially with Ryan Mason.
Come Sunday, yeah, it's 29, the youngest coach there's ever been in the Premier League. So,
wow.
I can see how basically it's not exactly been a great relationship, has it? Between Levy and Mourinho and the fans, and they've never really taken to Mourinho, and so you could argue that they've sacked him before he possibly wins a trophy, because if he wins a trophy, that does make Daniel Levy's job much harder in the summer. If he was thinking, I'm going to get rid of Mourinho, well, winning a trophy makes it a bit harder, because Mourinho can say, I've got you what you wanted.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting, though, Dav, that what you've said there about Mourinho, you could probably insert that at the majority of the clubs he's been at. As in, like, he doesn't really get on with the owner particularly well. Fans don't particularly, apart from Chelsea maybe, the fans don't particularly take to him.
Well, to be fair, since he's left Porto and Inter, everywhere he's been, in a sense, including Chelsea, but everywhere he's been, apart from them, they've got a bit more. The players have got a bit more ego about them, in a sense. So perhaps it does rub them up the wrong way. The fact that they know in a sense, when Mourinho's winning the Champions League with Inter and Porto, maybe the fact that they won the Champions League is why, in a sense, he's almost had this godlike status at those clubs. But when he's gone to clubs like Madrid, where you've got your Ronaldos, and Man United with your Paul Pogbas, it's like it really is. It seems to have rubbed them the wrong way, because those guys know they're going to win a Champions League or a World Cup at some point in their careers, so they got a bit more about them, in a sense, to bite back. Aren't quite as happy taking the... Because, to be fair, the way he manages, everyone praised when he was at clubs like Chelsea, but it's not a nicety, in a sense. He tries to put them down to, in a sense, kick themselves back up. It's like, you've been rubbish, and it's like, well, do something about it, and next week they play better. So it doesn't surprise me that perhaps maybe that's what's happened at Spurs. And but to be fair, we have heard that Harry Kane would apparently run through a brick wall for him. He really got on with him. So I'd be surprised at the same time if it was the players in particular that are the reason he's been sacked. Although at the same time, we speak about him 6 days away from a final. All Spurs, in a sense, he can't do worse than any other league manager they've had. Well, if he wins a trophy, because that's all Spurs fans want. You win it, it's that I think everyone forgives everything. So it does surprise me that Daniel Levy that much dislikes him, or that much doesn't want him running his club, that he's willing to risk their first chance at silverware in about 12 years just to get him out early. It's like, it just seems that the priorities are all in the wrong place.
Yeah. I agree. Sorry, Dav, I interrupted you there as well.
Well, this is one of those questions which, if we could answer, then I'm sure we'd be much richer than we are. I think at the end of the day, like, he was coming in behind Pochettino. Fans loved Pochettino. They were never really enamoured by Mourinho. It's interesting, isn't it? End of last week, Pogba comes out and says, I never really got Mourinho, never really understood him. Like, there was that difficulty in relationship with him when he was at United. And it's not been to the same extent this season, but there's been those questions. What's been going on with him and Gareth Bale? Like, it seemed to be going so well, and then there's been little back and forths in press conferences about, Bale posted this on his social media, and Mourinho is kind of, there just always seems to be something about the way that he manages, and so I think you mentioned Harry Kane running through a brick wall for him. I'm sure generally that is true, but like that question over, like, were the players unhappy, and was like Mourinho seeing what was Levy seeing what Mourinho was up to and thinking, like, we can't carry on with this. But then I would understand all of that next Monday after the final if they'd lost, but to do it now, it is a real, I don't know, it is a conundrum, isn't it? Maybe Jose will come and be a pundit for us sometime and will tell us what happened.
What did you make of some of the signings he made? Mourinho did note that he wanted a centre back and never actually got one.
Yeah,
he got
did.
Guys like
Joe Roden.
Did he? From Swansea.
Don't you dare laugh. We were done over. We were Rob blind.
Aston Villa robbed Nottingham Forest with Matty Cash. Joe Rogan is a nobody in means of good players.
Oh,
he didn't mean anything to Swansea, did he?
Jack, we want Dav to come back, mate. Keep your mouth shut.
Good grief. He was a Swansea boy, born and bred, and no one begrudged him going. To be fair, it was just like he went for far too little money.
How much did he go for?
I think it was 11, rising to 14.
That's quite a lot.
Not when Godfrey went from Norwich to Everton for 25.
Gosh, you're taking swipes at other clubs now. Oh. But at the same time, Matty Cash leaves Forest for Villa for about 15. Or less than 15, actually, it might have been.
Where were Forest this season?
Yeah, quite low down.
Well,
see the impact Matty Cash had. See the impact he had. He was clearly, to be fair, I honestly think he's the sort of right back that could go to any top club and be good. Dominant force. Cuts in. Beautiful shot on him. Anyway, back onto the point. Mourinho signing players. Yeah, he didn't get the centre back that he was kind of looking for. But he did sign Matt Doherty, Pierre, I can't remember his middle name, Højbjerg, Reguilon, Bale. He got some guys. Do you think he wanted all of them? Because I feel like Bale was kind of just like Daniel Levy went, you can have him, so I'll have him, and kind of just got him. But is that really Mourinho's squad to really judge him on?
I mean, Gareth Bale just needed a gym to get fit for the summer, didn't he? So that's why he came to Spurs.
He wasn't going to play at Madrid, was he?
No. I mean, I think some of those signings, Højbjerg is a definite Mourinho signing. Like, he's a very Mourinho type player, isn't he? Like, the way that he breaks up play and is solid defensively. I guess Doherty.
He's like Nemanja Matic 2.0.
Yeah,
really, isn't he?
yeah. I guess Doherty wasn't exactly he's not a kind of signing who's going to make them a top team. To be fair, like they've got a good squad, haven't they? Like it's not a bad squad, but then I suppose it isn't. He probably hasn't been able to bring in an awful lot, but then not a lot of teams have in the last 12 months, have they? Because of the situation we've been in. So it's not been a straightforward time to be signing players and selling players, but yeah, I guess we're not to know. But it's not a coincidence. The same thing happened at United, wasn't it? Like he was going after, he wanted a centre back then, and he never, he didn't get his wishes.
But ironically, he wanted Toby Alderweireld when he was at Man United. He goes to Spurs and they sell him. Well, he's gone, isn't he, Toby Alderweireld? He's back at Ajax, I think.
Is he?
I think so.
I'll pass on
I
that.
didn't know that.
I might be wrong on that, but I got a feeling either he's left or maybe it was just that he was leaving this season. But yeah, I just thought it was quite funny that he wanted him for so long and now he's got him.
I can't help but feel with Mourinho, like whenever you could almost like write a template of how his tenure at a football club is going to go. Well, not necessarily the whole tenure, but as in you can almost write a template of how his end is going to go. As in he always complains about not having enough money to spend or not being able to sign a player. He almost always falls out with like a big player, like you said, Dav. And I don't know perhaps whether this is me just being a bit harsh, but I feel like Mourinho's very much lost his aura.
Do you feel like he needs to go to more of a cult club in a sense? A sort of middle of the ground, you know, like when he was at Porto and Inter. Maybe Inter were towards the top of the Italian league back then, but they were more salt of the earth in a sense. These are just tough, hard as nails guys, no personality really about them. Do you think he needs to go back to a club like that?
You know them all, Jack, do you?
I mean...
Yeah, personally, on a team level.
I mean, I think... I don't know, it's a tricky one. I think part of the problem is that I feel like football has changed a lot since Mourinho's
Too many
philosophy.
prima donnas.
Well, not necessarily that, but as in like when you look at the type of football that's played now, when you look at the Bayern Munich team that won the Champions League last year, you look at the Liverpool team that won the league in the Champions League the season before, as in it's all about kind of very fast, aggressive kind of football. Very much taking the game to the other team. Whereas Mourinho's sort of philosophy is a lot more conservative. I don't know, I just feel like the game has kind of moved on. And like you look at Pep Guardiola's style of play and, like it's been said this year that is in, like, people have said, like Guardiola's adapted, as in like even, they don't seem to have quite as much possession as they have done in the past, City, but as in they seem to be winning games consistently. Whereas I feel like Mourinho hasn't really adapted, as in like, we'll go on to this later, but he seems to have like a certain type of striker, and they're kind of the focal point. Mm-hmm. Very sort of conservative style of play, and I just feel like football's moved on from that a little bit.
Well, that's
and
good.
as in,
go on.
Sorry,
let you finish. No, let you finish it.
Well, and I don't know. I feel like when you look at, I'm not sure Mourinho would want to go to a club that's, when you've won as much as Mourinho has, what's the draw to go to a lesser club then, I guess?
Because in a sense, he gets full reign, I think. When he's gone to these big clubs, he's got guys like Ed Woodward, Daniel Levy, Ronaldo, sort of deciding on his behalf as what the club's going to do next.
Yeah.
You go to I'm trying to think if there's maybe like a Roma, or I think someone said Celtic. That'd be an interesting one. But you go to one of those clubs which isn't generally that successful, particularly on the European stage at the moment. Give him full reign to do what he wants, and he could really get some sort of ethos going there, perhaps.
Without want to fire a shot, is that not what Spurs are anyway?
No, because I think they've got too much ambition. I don't think Celtic and Roma have that much ambition. Celtic in particular, they've just got to do well in Scotland. There's no I don't think anybody judges them on their Champions League, how far, whether they get out of the qualifying round for the start. But I don't think anybody really judges them on that, if I'm honest.
I would just like to say, I feel like Spurs are better than Roma and Celtic. I just mean in terms of, like you said, how they haven't necessarily won silverware in a lengthy amount of time.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Talking about Mourinho's tactics, though, and his sort of over-dependence on a central striker, perhaps making him outdated. Football's adapted over the years. We, at one stage, had 6 strikers in teams. Then you had Italian teams playing with 5 at the back and a sweeper because you need it. Then you got Christ total football. And then Mourinho came along with a sort of defensive block. And then Barcelona's tiki-taka replaced that. And now Klopp's gegenpressing is replacing that. Do you not think that he's just too stuck in his way? Do you think he needs, philosophically, in a sense, to change his style of football? Or do you think there is still a place for his uber-defensive tactics in the modern game?
I was reading recently that I think he has become outdated to the extent of, obviously, his tactics don't bring results in the way that they used to. But I was reading something recently in the way that he's really not a massive fan of sports science. So the whole sports science side of the game, that's really been embraced in the last decade or so, hasn't it? Maybe going back further than that, but especially in the last 10 years. And apparently, when Solskjaer took over at United, there was a lot of kind of re-establishing of that kind of thing to do, because there just wasn't the data, because Mourinho didn't give that the time that a lot of other modern coaches do.
Quickly on that point, I did read, since Mourinho's left, it, and obviously loads on Spurs, they were talking about how the Spurs players were unhappy when Pochettino was there, because he was making them do loads of training sessions, in a sense, getting them as fit as possible, probably on that sports science side of things. And when Mourinho came in, he wasn't having as many intense workouts, at least, So perhaps, I see what you mean, but it's carried on to Spurs as well as United, as you were saying.
Yeah. So I don't know if, you kind of get the impression now that the tactics of generally conservative hitting on the brake, I guess we do forget that they were top of the Premier League back in December. So
yeah,
they're not completely useless tactics. He's not manager of Spurs for nothing. But
no.
I just think those kind of tactics could maybe win you a Champions League or an FA Cup, if
more of a cup competition.
If things go well for you, because you've just got to execute that game plan a certain number of times in 90 minutes. Whereas over the course of a season, it's a long time to, to be able to continue to do that again and again, and teams work you out, and that's obviously what happened, wasn't it? It worked for them the first half of the season, and then you work out how to play Spurs and beat them, or just to negate their counter. Stop Son getting in behind, and you go a long way to stopping Spurs, despite the fact that any team with Harry Kane in it is gonna. Harry Kane gets into any team and improves it, doesn't he? In his finishing. But I think ultimately you can't win a game with 2 good finishers and a bus.
No, I do think it's worth considering. I do think the standard for, the top teams has been raised in the last couple of years. When you look at the points that, Liverpool had last year, City had the 2 seasons before that, and Liverpool as well, coming runners up with 97 points. That's almost, it is unheard of. I think that's the most points by a runner-up ever. So I do think the standard has changed in terms of getting points, and I think when you look at Mourinho's philosophy over the years, his results against the top teams, a lot of the time it was just a case of just get a draw, just don't lose. And I feel now, if you as a Liverpool fan, I remember thinking back to last season, as in not towards the end because the gap kind of grew, but as in at the start of the season when you're playing City, it was almost like if you don't win this game, that could be the league gone. So
which
I do
is
think
why they
that
need
stands.
Playoffs. It's too early in the season.
That's a way to bring it full circle. Goodness, you've managed like an hour and 45 minutes in to do full circle right back to the start. No, but I guess what I mean is then there's that more of that incentive to kind of go out and get a game and get the 3 points, rather than perhaps the more conservative style that we're used to from Mourinho, when the standard is so high that winning or losing a game could potentially mean winning or losing the league.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at Solskjaer, he just decided not to lose games against the top 6. If he'd have gone out and won some of them, perhaps we're, less than the 8 or 9 points behind City that we actually are. Yeah, well, I think should we leave it off there? Is anything else anybody wants to say about anything in particular?
I don't think so. I think that was a fairly
substantive,
comprehensive football chat. Really, there was a lot to cover in this past week, wasn't there?
Yeah, quite a lot.
I mean, what a bizarre set of circumstances. As in, when we set this time in to record this podcast, I would never have thought that the European Super League would have both come and gone in that time.
Yeah,
but there we are.
Short-lived.
Short-lived. Dav, thank you for joining us once again.
Okay. Thanks for having me, boys.
Pleasure to have the knowledge, as always. As usual, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so if you're listening on either of those, why not give us a follow or subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Anchor, Pocket Casts. Pretty sure that's all of them.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the confirmation. Thank you all for listening, and we shall speak to you soon.